Richard. I can't believe I'm awake right now, Rich thought to himself as he read Shaun's text. He dropped his phone on his bed and continued looking over his notes. He reminded himself that there was such a thing as over-preparedness. He was walking a fine line of falling into that category. It wasn't that Richard was nervous, it was just that he couldn't sleep. For the past several weeks, Richard was having trouble sleeping. He would stay up until 5 in the morning. He would go to his internship at 9 o'clock, get out at 3, go to school at 5 in the evening, get back to the dorm at 9 at night, go to sleep from 9 until 1 in the morning, and start the process all over again. He tried to go to sleep at least for an hour or two. It was his big day. He knew that it was important to be well rested, plus he didn't want to have bags under his eyes during the presentation. He didn't think 2 hours of sleep would fix that, though. His alarm rang at 8:30. He didn't know if he had ever fallen asleep. He knew that his eyes had been closed. That much he was certain of. Rich slowly got out of bed and crossed the small bedroom to go to the bathroom. He took his toothbrush, toothpaste, shaving cream, and razor with him. That process took him less than 15 minutes. He was getting good at shaving. He finished with a splash of cold water on his face. He looked in the mirror and tried to feel good about what he saw. He turned away and went back into the bedroom. The MTV internship was in the heart of Times Square. Every morning as he stepped out of the subway entrance, he was engulfed by the tide of people moving through the street. He would follow the tide effortlessly until it let him off a stop. He would break off with a couple hundred stragglers in the direction of his building. Rich recognized his fellow interns and waved to them as he made eye contact. He took the elevator with them up to the floor that they worked on. A picture of Jay-Z posing with one of Richard's employers was the first thing he saw every morning when the doors of the elevator opened up. Eminem's picture came next. He was standing in a section of the office Richard would go to for coffee. He followed the trail of celebrities all the way over to a small desk in the corner of the large room. He dropped off his bag and headed off in the direction of his boss and mentor. Rich knocked on her glass door before taking a step inside. Amari looked up from the notes strewn across her desk and smiled warmly at Richard. "Are you excited?" she asked when Richard approached her. "Yeah, pretty excited. I hope I do well. I'm pretty confident on the material. I spent a good time on the PowerPoint, so I'm feeling pretty optimistic about it," Rich said. "You should. I'm very proud of you. We don't get many interns who choose to try and pitch a whole TV show idea. I've been trying to tell them that you're definitely in the wrong department, but maybe they'll listen to me after your presentation," she sighed and crossed her fingers. "We can only hope." "Well, I just wanted to thank you for this amazing opportunity, all of it. I've really learned a lot working here, and I credit most of it to you and the fact that you hired me," Rich said. "You're quite welcome, Richard," Amari smiled. Her bright white teeth stood out against the backdrop of her pretty brown skin. "I pride myself on choosing the most driven interns. No matter what happens today, I want you to know if you keep this drive, you will go very far in life, Richard. I'm sure of that. That's why I have no problem encouraging you." "Are you nervous?" Rich laughed softly. "A little bit. I just kind of want to get it over with," he said with a small smile. "Use it as a learning experience. Get some coffee and go over everything one more time. I'll meet you in the conference room in 1 hour." "Good luck," Amari said cheerfully. Rich followed her instructions. He left her office and poured himself a cup of coffee, imagining Eminem standing right next to him. It was his inspiration for the show he was about to pitch in under an hour. He sat at his desk and waited. He checked over everything for the 15th time that week and waited anxiously. The other interns chatted noisily to each other a couple feet away. "I came up with a marketing strategy that could be implemented on Vine that would cost virtually no money. Vine is a completely untapped avenue right now. It's just now getting popular, but no major companies or celebrities have really started using it yet. I'm going to tell them that MTV could be the first one. Imagine cheap 9-second commercial with semi-high production value. It would stick right out," a kid with an extremely nice haircut said to one of the more attractive female interns. "Wow, that is a really good idea. I feel like an idiot now. I was going to talk about increasing marketing on Facebook," the girl said. Rich stared at the two of them in total awe of the interaction. He watched the girl's face as it lit up with laughter at one of the guy's unfunny jokes. She looked beautiful. Richard had given his best attempt at having a conversation with her. He wanted so badly to be able to be effortless, to chat with a beautiful girl while not constantly thinking about if the next word that came out of his mouth would sound stupid. He remembered the awkward position the two were forced into several weeks ago when they had both won raffle tickets to see The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. He remembered how uncomfortable she had looked when he had tried to engage her in conversation during the commercial breaks. He was still upset about it. And this fucking guy looks like he could fuck her at a moment's notice if he felt like it, Rich thought bitterly. It was why he liked focusing on his work. The more effort he put into this pitch, the less time he had to think about the plethora of attractive females all around him. The less time he had to think about how much he wanted each and every one of them, but couldn't have them. He rolled his eyes in disgust of his own internal thought. He wanted to slap himself but knew that would draw too much attention. So instead, Richard grit his teeth and dug his short fingernails into his palm as a means of a discreet punishment to his own weak thoughts. 10 o'clock came slowly but surely. He followed the other interns into the large conference room that was placed in the middle of the open room. Glass windows enclosed it. Richard saw the executives through the glass. He saw 20 men and women, most of whom he had never met, that held the power to give him a job. He filed in behind the other interns and took a seat at the far end of the conference table. He clutched his laptop and his notes and counted down the seconds before his hands would become sweaty. It went in a blur. Richard tried to pay attention to the presenters. He tried to gauge everyone's level of enthusiasm as each intern pitched their idea. Most of them were members of the development team. Some were higher-ups who must have been bored on a Tuesday and felt like coming in to watch interns do a little song and dance for them. They looked bored. All of them did. Richard didn't want them to be bored when he presented. He wanted them to be interested. He wanted to get them excited about his idea. He balled his hands into a fist under the table and waited for his turn. Richard ended up being the last person to go. He was aware of standing up and hooking his laptop up to the prompter machine. He was aware of a dry mouth and lightheadedness. He was aware of all eyes on him. Amari was there sitting at the edge of the 20 or so execs. She smiled at him and gave him a wink. He took a breath and started. In this country there are multiple genres of music that every generation listens to. Rock and roll, heavy metal, alternative, country, folk, R&B, and rap. This channel, MTV2, is based primarily in reality TV shows about the lives of real-life individuals. I have come up with a show idea that merges the music-based roots of MTV to the current status of its reality-based orientation. People like to watch conflict and struggle. It's why sports are such a big part of almost every culture. Competition between two or more people. Someone has to win, and that is why we watch. I would like to follow the lives of 3 battle rappers as they go from city to city fighting other rappers to get the reputation and rewards that they desire. I want to follow them and show our potential viewers how they live, where they come from, and what they do on a regular basis to be at the height of their game. Richard clicked at his PowerPoint slideshow as he talked. Images of large crowds surrounding battle rappers flickered past. Iron Solomon is regarded as one of the most notable battle rappers currently. The show could start with him and follow 2 other rappers at varying stages in their respective careers. We would choose a rapper who is making an early rise to fame in that underground world and show the viewers how he is dealing with that success. Manchester Young would be a perfect example. Rich showed the slide of Manchester Young, a young rapper who grinned at the camera holding a large check for $20,000. We could also choose a rapper who has fallen from grace after humiliating defeat, and we could show his fight to get back on top, like Murda Mook. 3 rappers at different stages in their career. Their paths could cross multiple times throughout the show's season as we emphasize a major rap battle that is covered in the finale. After the length of 10 or 12 episodes, the audience members will have already chosen their favorites. The finale gets to show which one is crowned the top battle rapper of that year. It'll be the Super Bowl of battle rapping, Rich said. Does a championship-like tournament exist in that world, or are you just making that part up? One of the members of the development team asked, a young man in his early 30s. It was the first question asked by anyone during the whole time the interns had been presenting. Rich took it as a good sign. There are definitely some tournaments that we could use to emphasize the quality and skill of the 3 rappers that the show would be following. However, currently there is no tournament that crowns the best battle rapper in the game. It could be easily engineered into the show. We can make a tournament and call it the King of Battle Rapping. The title will explain itself. We market it in all the major cities in the country at all the major rap battle events. The great thing about it is the cost is extremely minimal because the rappers put up their own money. They have to buy into the tournament. The more rappers that buy in, the bigger the purse is. We would only have to focus on the core cost of production. Richard finished speaking as he came to the end of his slideshow. He crossed his hands in front of his body and waited for further questions. "Thank you," a slightly older woman said. Rich took back his seat and felt himself deflating. He looked over at the groups as they whispered amongst each other and wrote on yellow notepads and laptops. He thought he did well. He felt good about it. He wanted to smile but figured that would look extremely foolish. He looked at the interns that sat behind him. They all sat staring absentmindedly at the wall in front of them or texted on their phones. "This is my fucking competition," he thought with disdain. A man stood up from the center of the group across the table. "Okay, we'd like to thank you all for taking the time to make such thought-out and professional presentations. We shall consider each of your ideas with care and consideration, and we encourage you all to continue thinking creatively and talking with your team leaders about any potential new ideas that might help this company be the best that it can be. Thank you," he said. They left one by one. Amari stayed behind and led the interns out of the conference room. She congratulated each one of them as they passed her on their way to return back to their work. Rich lingered as he walked by her, hoping to hear some sort of positive reinforcement about his presentation. She smiled at him knowingly and placed a hand on his shoulder. She squeezed it gently. She leaned towards him and whispered, "Great job," before returning back to her office. Richard's body tingled with elation as he sat back down at his desk. His mind savored the picture of Amari's smiling face as she leaned over and whispered to him. "Great job," he repeated to himself. This time he did allow a small smile to creep upon his face. Richard skipped class that day as a form of celebration. He was lying in bed watching Vimeo videos when Joe entered the bedroom at 7 o'clock. Joe laughed when he saw Rich in bed. Did you skip class today?" he asked as he dropped his book bag onto the floor. I did do that," Rich said. "We're almost done this semester. Isn't that ridiculous?" Joe asked. "Yeah, like a month and a half left. Pretty crazy," Rich said. "We have finals 3 weeks from now," Joe said. "Yep," Rich confirmed. "It wasn't what I expected," Joe said, sitting down. "What do you mean?" Rich asked. "I don't know. I was expecting it to be different, I guess. Going to school in New York I thought would be a different experience than going to BCC, but it was pretty much the same thing," Joe said. "Yeah, school sucks no matter where you go, man. I quickly discovered that last semester," Rich said. "I was sitting in class watching the professor today, and I kept thinking that I could do that, what he's doing. I could make that a job if I wanted, teaching film in a college. But at the same time, I just think of how stupid it would be to go to school for 4 to 6 years only to get a job at the end that has me going to school indefinitely. I just feel like that's so stupid. Like, I hate it right now. Why would I like it anymore on the other side as a professor?" Joe asked. "Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. It's a job, though. It's not the job that I would want, but it's a job in the field that you went to school for, which counts for something," Rich said. "I don't know. I feel like with every day that passes in school, I realize more and more how hard it is to actually get anywhere in this industry, without knowing anybody at least. I sit in class and I listen to these essays about script analysis of shitty movies. The one class that we have together, our final, is writing a TV pilot. I know without a doubt that your pilot and mine are not only going to contain the best ideas and concepts, but they'll also be the best written and thought out than any other person in that class. I'm positive. What I'm not positive about is how I'm supposed to beat the kid next to me who is best friends with Sofia Coppola's son," Joe said. "I know. That's what I've been coming to terms with this entire year. It's why I'm writing spec scripts and sketches as often as I can. It's why I got the internship at MTV. I feel like the only way I'm going to be able to edge out the competition is through hard work," Rich said. "But that only goes so far. I was talking to Kyle the other day. He says he tries to write a new screenplay every 3 months just to keep up the practice. That's ridiculous. I would get so discouraged after like the second screenplay knowing that no one is ever going to read it. I would just wonder what the point is. I mean, even if I went out to Cali next year and Kyle helped me get a job at Kevin Spacey's production company, it won't really mean anything. It'll just mean that I'm supposed to work in an entry-level position for the next 5 years. I don't know. It's frustrating," Joe said. I did a television pitch at MTV today. It went pretty well, I think," Rich said. "That's cool. I didn't think interns would actually get to pitch shows there," Joe said. "Yeah, well, most of the interns pitched like marketing ideas and other shit. I was the only one to actually have a full-fledged show idea, so hopefully I stood out," Rich said. "What's your goal over there, though?" Joe asked. Richard felt his anger flare. He quickly tempered it. "To get a job," he said dryly. "But why? Why do you want a job at MTV? They do reality TV shows. There's no creation involved. You don't even watch the channel, so what's the point in trying so hard to get a job there?" Joe asked. Richard's face twitched. He scratched at it while he curled his toes in quiet rage. He concentrated on the screen of the laptop in front of him and said, "You gotta start somewhere," in an even tone. "Fucking idiot." Rich waited for Joe to leave before resuming the video he was watching. Joe mentioned something about getting food. He invited Rich. Rich declined. Joe left and closed the door behind him. Richard exhaled slowly and evenly. He slammed his laptop closed and put it underneath his bed. Rich rolled onto his side and closed his eyes. He wanted to be asleep by the time Joe got back. He woke up to the sound of rain hitting the window. He looked at the time on his phone and almost burst out laughing. 3 o'clock on the dot. It was pitch black in the room. He couldn't see his own fingers in front of him. Rich closed his eyes again and waited for his brain to tell him what to do. Nothing came to him. The anger that he had felt before he went to sleep had replaced by a feeling of emptiness, a disconnect. He felt it every night at this time. He couldn't call himself an insomniac. Insomniacs never slept. Rich slept irregularly. There was a difference. He waited for a sign. Joe snorted loudly above him. Rich snorted to himself. Blatant enough. He thought to himself as he grabbed his laptop and earbuds off the floor. He placed them into his ear and opened his laptop. A couple of seconds later, Rich was staring at the same Vimeo video that was playing before Joe entered many hours ago. Richard had been watching it for about 20 minutes before he had turned it off. It was a short documentary about a man who quit his job, bought a boat, and sailed around the world by himself. Rich looked at the screenshot. The man lay on the small boat with his hands behind his head, looking nothing but peaceful. He clicked resume and continued watching. The first couple of weeks, months even, I felt a peace that I had never felt before. I felt capable. I felt the strength of my own body making my way on my own with no help. It gave me a strange sense of peace, the knowledge that I was truly alone on this planet of billions. But something changed over time. It seemed that the further I sailed from land, the longer I was out at sea, the happier I was whenever I came ashore again. I started feeling an unexplainable connection to every person I encountered. When I would go into a densely populated marketplace, every brush of my skin by another human being tingled against my entire body, and it would stay with me even after I left. Suddenly I would be in the middle of the ocean and feel the people that I left behind 3 weeks ago. I would see the faces of strangers that I had yet to meet in my travels even when I was alone. The overview effect. I researched it later on. Astronauts experience it when they go out into outer space. It's the concept of feeling connected to the world and the people around you. It happens from being alone for a long period of time, of feeling your own fragility and worth simultaneously. It's a break in that realization that there is more to life than just your mortality. That happened to me while I was out there sailing alone at sea. I let go of myself and became a part of the world around me. It has changed me forever. Richard didn't believe in God. He had no faith in anything whatsoever. Predetermination, karma, what goes around comes around, he didn't believe in any of it. Yet at that moment, as he watched the documentary, all he could feel was that somehow Richard was meant to find this film. The overview effect. Rich repeated the word to himself in a whisper. The overview effect. A warm feeling of anticipation spread throughout his body as he watched the film in its entirety. It was what he was waiting for. The overview effect. Richard was alone. He had felt alone for as long as he could remember, before he came to New York. He felt his fragility and self-worth simultaneously every day of his life in New York. He felt it on the streets walking next to taller, more capable men. He felt it yesterday when he pitched his pilot that he had spent 2 months preparing for. The overview effect was coming. Rich just had to wait. That knowledge felt good. If he waited long enough, the loneliness would go away. Or so he hoped. I don't know what to say to you other than I'm fucking proud of you, man. I am very proud of you. I'm sorry it took so long to celebrate your victory, but I'm glad it finally happened. I didn't want you to think what you've done is so far is undeserving of a celebration. You've done more productive shit than the 4 of us combined. Believe that. And I know you're just getting started, Shaun said. Thanks, man. I'm glad someone gives a fuck, Rich chuckled. Seriously, it's nice. I've been really focused this year, and you're right, I feel like I haven't even gotten started. There's still so much more shit I have to do, he said. Until you're a rich, successful filmmaker? Shaun asked. Rich shook his head. I don't have an end goal. I've never thought about what point I'd like to stop trying at. If I ever got the chance to write for a show like Mad Men or something like that, I don't know how long I'd be satisfied with that position before I'm ready to keep challenging myself, he said. Good. That's a good thing, Richie boy. People like you are the ones who change the world. You have something in you that you want people to see, and you won't be satisfied until it happens. The world needs to recognize you as an outstanding individual before you'll ever think of slowing down. And I wish you all the fucking luck in the world, Shaun said. Thanks, man. That means a lot, Rich said. I knew it, too. I knew you would be the one to actually get shit done on his own. Not Joe, and definitely not Chris. I remember how fast you gave up on the Mike Geller thing. We were all excited. We all thought that this was going to be our big ticket out of here. Everyone was texting me like every day asking if I had heard back from him or the fake TV execs I never fucking met. The ones who emailed me and texted me but refused to give me a fucking phone call. Both Chris and Joe asked about it just about every day for the first month it was going on. And I remember that you stopped after 2 weeks, asking about it. You would get really quiet whenever someone mentioned it around you. I saw it, Richie. I saw you trying to forget about it and move on. You weren't going to let it stop you. Instead of clinging to the hope of something that seemed less than real, like I did, you dropped it and stepped over it without even missing a beat. I've always respected you for that kind of thing. And now you're here, pitching TV shows for fucking MTV. If that doesn't say something, I don't know what does, Shaun said. Rich noticed as he sat across the table from Shaun that his eyes had grown misty. Shaun squinted and looked away. He tried to laugh it off. I get sentimental sometimes, he said sheepishly. It's no problem, man, Rich said somewhat uncomfortably. And now we're got $18 fucking burgers on the way to celebrate, Shaun said. This bill is going to be over $100. It's going to be awesome. Let's get dessert and coffee and everything. I bet you the coffee is going to be like $5 a piece. And the best part about it is it's just going to taste like coffee, he chuckled. I mean, I'm definitely not going to argue with you. This will probably be the best meal I've had in the past 3 months, with or without the coffee, Rich said and smiled. Well, what the fuck would you expect? You're a broke college boy. You don't even have a rich girlfriend to spoil you since you ruined it with that Jew from last semester, which I'm not even going to get into. I can understand where you're coming from. If she doesn't get your dick hard, she doesn't get your dick hard. It doesn't really matter how much money she has. And Joe's not going to take you out, Shaun laughed. Did you tell him about your TV pitch, he asked. Yeah, we had a brief convo about it. I think he said that's awesome or some shit, I don't remember. He's a dick, Rich said. Enough said, Shaun said. They were quiet for a while. A waiter came and grabbed their already eaten $25 appetizer off the table. Another waiter came and scraped crumbs off the table while someone else refilled their barely touched water glasses. Rich shook his head and made eye contact with Shaun, who grinned at him. Ridiculous, right? That's fucking New York for you. They probably make like $200 a night here. Probably more like $400 given the pricing, Shaun said. When you finish BCC, you should move up here to New York and go to school here. That'd be really smart. You could get a job at one of these restaurants and make a shitload of money. We could be roommates, Rich said. And how are you going to pay for your half of the rent? Shaun asked with a smile creeping onto his lips. Food stamps, Rich sniffed. They both laughed. What about Joe? Aren't you guys going to be on campus next year? Shaun asked. I'm trying my hardest not to let that happen. For one, it's expensive as shit to live in those dorm rooms. I could save so much more money if I lived in Brooklyn and took the subway to school. Also, I just want to get away from Joe. I was doing better on my own here last semester. I went out more and just did shit with my life. I've been the shittiest piece of trash ever since Joe moved in. I just stay up all night watching Netflix and Vimeo, Rich said. Joe's just sucking the life out of you, huh? Shaun said, chuckling. I can understand, man. He's not really the kind of guy to go out spontaneously to a bar or some shit. I would be a great wingman if I lived with you. We can make it a rule to go out to a bar at least once a week and hit on bitches. Just to stay, and get the practice. For both of us. You more than me, of course, but still, Shaun said. Rich chuckled. That all sounds awesome, man. A lot of ifs, though. You have to be single, live in New York, a bunch of shit, he said. Yeah, it'll probably never happen. I never got a chance to tell you. After 3 weeks of thinking on it, I am mostly positive that I'm going to follow the advice of Caleb and move to California for a year, Shaun said. Rich raised his eyebrows. Caleb told you to do this? Why? Rich asked. He didn't tell me to do it. He kind of just slid it over the table in the form of an idea. It was kind of like Inception. Anyway, basically, the conversation that we had was about me feeling unfulfilled working towards getting a degree in psychology or law or anything. I couldn't get over the fact that I was walking away from something that I used to want, which was to be a successful /working actor. That was what I wanted. So Caleb suggested that I go to California for a year and put every ounce of energy into making that dream come true. I go there alone, and I focus on making enough money to survive and be an actor. That's it. No bitches, no hobbies, just working towards the highest achievement that I can get. Then at the end of the year, I look at what I've done and I get to decide if I go back to college or not, Shaun said. Are you saying you broke up with Sinem finally? Rich asked. No, Shaun said with a small laugh. You know me. I drag breakups out to the end of time. She knows, though, about the trip. I told her about it yesterday. She knows the relationship is a ticking time bomb. It's stupid, but I'm trying to look on the bright side. Free sex until it's over, right? But you do know that it takes a lot longer than a year for an actor to get anywhere in LA, right? Like, there are actors that are there for 10 years and are still waiting tables, Rich said. I'm aware. That's why the idea is only to go for 1 year. I'm afraid of going there for 10 years and getting nowhere with acting on my life. I want to fuck hot bitches, and I can't do that if I'm waiting tables for 10 years. So I go for a year. If I get 1 or 2 roles that make me think that I might actually have a future in this, then I stay for another year. If by the end of the first year I've got nothing but a couple of local TV commercials or I'm an extra in the next Transformers or some shit, I go the fuck back home and I happily find a job that I can make $100,000 in. Then I buy hookers for the rest of my life. Get it? Shaun asked. Yeah, I get it. I think it makes sense in a way. You're basically going there to fail, Rich said. Basically, Shaun smiled. But once I do fail, miserably, I can move on with the rest of my life. I can become successful in something that has nothing to do with a certain look. I can play the Game of Thrones just as well as any politician, believe me. That's on the table as far as potential careers. Politics, Shaun said. Rich nodded his head slowly, trying to take all the information in. Well, good luck, man. It makes sense. When do you plan on going, Rich asked. As soon as fucking possible, Richie boy. I'm pretty dead set on doing it. I know that there are a lot of things I have to do in order for it to work, but I really think this would be beneficial to my life. I've been so unhappy this year, Rich. You have no idea. You don't even know the person I've become. I used to be cocky and confident and full of energy. Now I'm scared all the time. Literally scared of the future and the present. I'm scared that the unhappiness I'm feeling right now will last for the entirety of my life. It terrifies the shit out of me. I can hardly function throughout the day because of it. And I can't end up like my father. I can't. He lies to himself about everything. He tells himself that he's the greatest lawyer in the South Jersey area, that he's going to be the greatest saxophone player alive, that he speaks the best English in the country. He says these things out loud to me. He tells himself these lies to keep going, to go to fucking sleep at night. I can't. I want my happiness to be real. I really think this trip will help. It doesn't really matter either way. I don't know what else to do, Shaun said. His eyes went downcast to the floor as his head followed. He looked pathetic. Rich reached his hand across the table awkwardly and patted Shaun's shoulder. Hey man, it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. You're young. You're going to figure it out. We both will, Rich said. He hated these moments. He wasn't good at making people feel better. Shaun looked up into Richard's eyes. Will you promise me something, Richard? Shaun asked. Sure, man, Rich said. If you ever make it, and you start making your own movies, directing and writing and all that stuff, will you save my life and put me in a movie? Would you please do that for me? I'm not talking right after you get your big break. More like a couple years after you've acclimated to the status of where you are in life now. Maybe you've had sex with Jennifer Lawrence and Elizabeth Olsen, or Shailene Woodley. She seems like your type. After all that, would you help me out when I ask for it? Shaun asked. Of course I will. You won't even have to ask. I'll find you and I'll bring you to LA if you're not there. Of course, man, Rich said. Okay. I won't kill myself then. Just don't forget who paid for your first $100 meal, Shaun said. Rich and Shaun both laughed at the forced joke. The waiter appeared a moment later with their food. He placed the plates lightly in front of the two of them. Shaun looked at Richard and put on his biggest smile. And then came the burgers, he said. The bill was $134 with the tip included. Shaun had said that Richard was his most expensive date to date. He was happy about that. Fuck the Persian, he had said. They parted on the corner of Richard's dorm building after he gave directions on how to get back to Penn Station. They shared a long hug together. Richard could feel Shaun's worry, his depression, his angst from the way he held on to him. Rich was upset with himself when he realized that as Shaun walked away, he began to feel better instead of worse. Shaun's baggage was getting further and further away from him. Richard could worry about himself and his own depression again. It came back quick enough. Rich did not stay to watch Shaun turn the next corner. Instead, he turned around and headed back to his dorm. He took the elevator up to his floor. He felt heavy and tired. He heard laughing behind the door as the elevator dinged upon arrival of destination. The door slid open and Rich was face to face with his roommate, Travis, and two girls. Travis gasped when he saw Rich and burst out laughing. We were just talking about you, I swear to God. What are you doing right now? Can you come out with us? We have to talk to you about something. Come to the bar with us. Are you going to? Travis asked rapidly. I don't really, Rich started to say. He looked at the two females. One was a short, tan Asian in a short dress. She smiled at Rich as she looked him up and down, quite blatantly. The other was a nondescript white girl that reminded him of the Jew from last semester. His eyes went back to the Asian who was still smiling at him, making him feel uncomfortable. Too late. You didn't come with an excuse fast enough. You're coming, Travis said. He pushed Richard back into the elevator and let the girls in. I'm a little tipsy already if you can't tell, but that's okay. This is Sophie and Hannah, he directed towards Rich. Then he turned towards the girls. This is Rich, my roommate I was telling you about, the film major. Your roommate is cute, Travis. You got lucky, the Asian girl said. She was Hannah. Thank you, Rich said awkwardly. He tried to force out a laugh, but it came out like a garbled cough. You are cute, Rich. Not enough people acknowledge that about you. Good for Hannah, Travis smiled. Anyway, so, Hannah has a movie idea that she wants to talk to you about. She wants to know how to write a script. Hannah, you're welcome, he said. You tell me and I'll buy you a beer, Hannah said. She looked at him seductively, like she wanted to eat him. Her eyes seemed to pierce into him. It's kind of complicated. I mean, there's a structure involved in stuff like that. It's kind of hard to explain over the course of one beer, Rich said. Ah, you're tricky. 2 beers then, mister. And I'm not going to pass that. If you get drunk, then you'll be absolutely useless to me, Hannah said. The elevator opened at the ground level. The four headed out into the chilly night air. What's your movie about? Richard asked Hannah. Hannah studied his face for a moment, then laughed. I'm not sure if I can tell you. You're in the business, right? You might try to steal it. I don't even know you. How can I trust you? She asked, still smiling. Good point. I guess it's not necessary. It would probably make me be able to help you better, though. Well, what do I know? I'm just a film major, right? Rich asked. Hannah and the others burst out laughing. Your friend is funny, Travis, Hannah said. Her eyes never left Richard, even as they walked to the bar. When they got to the bar that was a couple of blocks away, the four got a booth in the corner. Rich got in first on his side, and Hannah slid in after him. Richard could feel her leg against his own. He was aware that she was closer than she needed to be. There was enough room in the booth for them not to be touching. He could smell her perfume. It was nice. He thought of complimenting her on it, but decided against it. So about my movie, she started. Or are you the type of guy who likes payment up front? Hannah asked, her eyes twinkling with delight. Sex? Beer, you fucking idiot. He couldn't focus. Her hand brushed his thigh underneath the table. He didn't know if it had been done on purpose. He felt his dick starting to grow. How about you start with getting me a Yingling and we can half now, half later, Rich suggested. Hannah laughed and jokingly rolled her eyes. You drive a hard bargain, but okay. Are you going to accompany me to the bar? She asked as she slid out of the booth. Rich had a boner. The lighting in the bar was dim. He didn't think she'd see it if he got up. He chose to risk it and followed her to the bar. She ordered a Yingling and a Long Island iced tea for herself. Do you have a girlfriend? She asked abruptly. Rich didn't trust himself to speak. He shook his head. Hannah nodded her head knowingly and turned away from him. He couldn't tell what she was thinking. He wondered if this was a joke, if she was playing with him for fun. They got the beers and returned to their seat. Travis and Sophie were deep into a conversation about anal bleaching. So my movie idea, Hannah said when they sat down. Are you going to tell me about it? Rich asked. Hannah looked at him suspiciously and then smiled. It's about a sex addict and how she tries to keep it a secret from everyone. I want it to be dark. I want her to get into relationships and have them fail because a guy doesn't fuck her the way she wants to be fucked. Like, violent. She hates men, but even more she hates herself. So she wants guys to punish her so she can get off. I want to tell a story of a whore who knows she's a whore. I want her life to be ruined because of this fact. And I want to have her seek redemption at the end. She gets help from a psychologist that she eventually falls in love with. But I don't want it to have a happy ending. I want that relationship to fail because of her problem, Hannah said. Sounds like you thought a lot about this, Rich said. He took a sip of his beer. Yeah, I don't know where it came from. I was just sitting one day and this story came to me out of nowhere. Is that how it happens for most writers? Does that happen to you? Hannah asked. Not really. He nodded his head. Yeah, that happens all the time. I never get a chance to write them down, though, which I get pretty pissed about. But I have a couple ideas that I'm working on right now. Yeah? Like what? I showed you mine, so now you have to show me yours, Hannah said eagerly. Rich hesitated and spoke. There's this one idea about a guy who drives strippers around, kind of like a bodyguard for personal strippers. The one that show up at private hotels and stuff like that. So the guy is young and going to college for stuff, and basically he begins fantasizing about this one stripper. He ends up falling in love with her and she's aware of it. She flirts with him all the time and gets dressed in front of him so he can watch. And the story plays out in one night where one of the guys at the party they went to goes crazy and pulls out a gun when he gets told that he's not allowed to touch the girls. The gun accidentally goes off and ends up killing the stripper that the main character was in love with. That's the concept, at least, Rich said. Wow, that sounds really good. Seriously. Do you have a title? Hannah asked. Tease, Rich said. How appropriate, he thought. We both have good ideas, so I've come to the right place. Are you going to help me write mine? Hannah asked. He debated telling her that there was already a movie that had come out that year with basically the same premise as hers. Shame, with Michael Fassbender, directed by Steve McQueen. He thought maybe the fact that her main character is a girl would be enough difference to make the idea stand alone, but then he remembered Lars von Trier was in the process of making a movie called Nymphomaniac, which starred a female as the protagonist. He kept his mouth shut. I can give you some pointers, Rich said. I love pointers, Hannah said, laughing. He felt her hand against his thigh again. This time, the brush lingered there for a moment longer. She looked into his eyes and smiled. I have a date I'm supposed to go to tomorrow. If he cancels on me, I'm coming to you, she said. Okay, Rich said. Or maybe I'll come to you after. Yeah, why not? Unless the date goes well, because that would be messed up, right? Hannah asked herself the question. Her eyes went to the corner of her brain and she bit her lip and contemplated. Yeah, do whatever you want. You know where to find me. You were just at my dorm, Rich said. Hannah smiled devilishly as she leaned closer to Richard. Her face was inches away from his. She looked down at his lips. You're going to fuck me tomorrow, aren't you? Joseph. So have you met the new chick that Richie Boy's banging? Shaun asked through text. Joe was sitting on a train heading home from New York. It was Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the semester was over. Joe smiled as he texted Shaun back. Past tense. Have I met the chick that Rich banged? Singular. He only did it once, and yeah, I saw her. She looked Vietnamese, lol. Shaun texted back. Yo, I gotta be honest with you. He called me literally right after he did, sounding all proud of himself, like it was the best sex ever and shit. He got me hyped to get a pic of her, making her sound all hot and shit. I looked her up on Facebook. Let's just say I was kind of disappointed. Joe laughed to himself in the back of the train car. Yeah, she doesn't look any better in person. She was kind of gross, like she was a slutty ugly girl, which is never an attractive combination. Slutty hot girls work, but there are some perks with slutty hot girls. Slutty ugly girls? No good, he wrote back. Frowny face. That's really unfortunate. I was hoping you were going to tell me that she was hotter in person. Whatever. At least Richie boy got some good sex in his life. He sounded so proud of himself when he called me, lol. Fuck, he needs to fuck more, lol. Shaun texted. Joe nodded his head. Yeah, he needs a girlfriend. That's what they're good for. Consistent sex. He probably masturbates more than all of YFC combined, Joe responded. Do you know why he only fucked her once? He made it sound like it was going to be a reoccurring thing. I was happy for him, Shaun texted. Who knows? She looked like a whore, man. She was like 27 and still in college. Richard was probably like the third guy that she fucked that week. Why would she go back to him? Shakes my head. That's a real shame. He probably didn't even fuck her right. When I fuck a whore, my only goal is to remind her of the fact that she's a whore, through the degradation of her holes in face, lol. Rich probably fucked her like he loved her, laughing my ass off. Joe slapped his knee. No, he said to himself, laughing. He texted Shaun back. LOL, that's her dick, man. Yeah, I'm worried for him sometimes. His relationship with the opposite sex is so weird. Agreed. He's got to be happy with himself before he can be happy with a bitch, though. For longer than a week, that is, lol. You think Richard isn't happy with himself? Joe texted. Hell no, he's not happy with himself. He hates where he is in life. That's why he's trying so hard to change it. That's the reason he got an internship at MTV and enrolled in the new school. He's just trying to make himself feel better about his place in life. See, I know Richie boy very, very well. I can relate to him in some ways. That kid is very angry, lol. Joe frowned. He wasn't sure if he agreed with Shaun's analysis of his friend. Joe himself had never concluded those things, and he had lived with him for just under 4 months. He could almost see it, though, if he actually thought about it. When do you think he's going to be happy? Joe asked Shaun. Success will bring him happiness, hopefully. Validation. He wants people to respect him and to have a long trail of accomplishments behind him. He doesn't have any right now, hence why he is unhappy. I know what you're thinking. We won the film racing competition twice, but it wasn't his baby. He just edited both of them and acted in them. He wants something to be completely his own, so he can claim it and stand out from the crowd. That's Richie boy in a nutshell. A thought occurred to Joe. He remembered the conversation he had had with Richard about how the Young Folks comedy videos had been deleted off the internet. Richard had said that he did it because of his internship at MTV. He didn't want them to stumble upon work that he had done when he was 17 and inexperienced. He had deleted more than half of their videos. Why do you think he deleted our videos? Joe texted Shaun. I knew it was Richard. I fucking knew it. I went on there like a couple days ago to watch Eye Candy, only to discover that and 30 other videos were fucking deleted. I knew it was Richard. I was so fucking mad. God damn. He's always been like that, man. He carries shame with him wherever he goes. Deleting our shit was probably felt like cleansing for him. Ridding himself of his past failures and looking forward to the future. The reason it's super fucked up, though, is because he had no fucking right. They weren't his videos, they were all of ours. Just because he edited most of them doesn't give him the right to fucking delete them off the face of the planet whenever he sees it. It's fucked up. I hope he still has them on his hard drive. He better, Shaun texted back. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed myself when I found out about it. He didn't have to do that. He could have just put them on private or something so we could only watch them. Just for the purpose of nostalgia. You don't have to explain it to me, man. I'm proud of every video that we've ever made. Even the shitty ones. I look back at those times fondly. I'm genuinely upset right now. I don't even know if I want to talk to that fucker about it. I'm afraid I'd yell at him, lol. Fucking a Vietnamese prostitute and deleting our fucking videos. SMH. A voice buzzed over a loudspeaker as the train rolled to a stop. Now arriving at Hamilton Station. Now arriving at Hamilton Station. He texted Shaun as he stood up and got ready to leave the train. Yeah, I don't know if it's worth it. You wouldn't solve anything. You just end up getting in a fight with your friend. And then you'd both just be angry at each other. That's it. Joe followed the rest of the passengers off the train and walked over to the waiting area. He spotted Jennifer's car and headed over to it. She waved at him when she spotted him. Joe got into the passenger seat. Hey, he said to her. Hi, Jennifer said back. She started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. So, thanks for giving me a ride. I know it was kind of a sudden, Joe said. Yeah, it was. Why did you come back on a Wednesday? Don't you have school tomorrow and Friday? She asked. Joe shook his head. This week we basically have off because we're gearing up for finals. I have to write like 4 papers and turn in a couple of final projects and stuff. I mean, I could have gone to class, but they would have just gone over and what I'm supposed to write about and shit. Don't need it, Joe said. Oh, okay. So you just figured you'd come home early? Jennifer asked. Yeah, I kind of wanted to surprise my mom, which is why I asked you to pick me up. She's expecting me on Friday and was telling me how much she missed having me in the house a couple of days ago. So I just figured I might try to surprise her today, Joe said. Aw, that's really sweet, Joe. That's very nice. She'll be happy, Jennifer said, smiling. Yeah, I'm a pretty nice guy sometimes. I don't know. People like me, Joe said. Jennifer laughed and shook her head. Oh my God, you're so full of yourself. I take back what I said. Too late, you already said it. No takebacks, I called it, Joe said smugly. Jennifer giggled. You're so annoying sometimes. What you mean I'm annoying sometimes? Damn, girl, that's some mighty nasty shit to be saying to a nigga who just got out the pen. See, I was about to say that you was looking mighty fine when I rolled up in this bitch and saw you across from the street giving me the eye and shit. I was about to say pull over on the side of the road so I can get my dick wet in that tight-ass puss you got. But now that you calling me annoying and shit, I might just have to go for that ass, Joe said in his trademark black voice. Jennifer glared at Joe from behind the steering wheel. I don't know why I even bother sometimes, she said more to herself than to him. Yeah, you're right, Joe said, keeping his ghetto accent. They arrived in front of Joe's house. So I'll call you later? I was thinking sometime while I'm here we go on the border for dinner. I've been thinking about that place for a while, Joe said as he opened the door to the car. Okay, sounds good to me. I'm buying this time. You bought the last 2 times, Jennifer said. Dope. Thanks again for the ride. Okay, bye. Joe slammed the door and sprinted off in the direction of his house. He looked over his shoulder once to catch a glimpse of Jennifer laughing and rolling her eyes before driving away. Joe entered in through the garage. He could hear his mother in the living room watching TV. He walked over to the entrance of the room, taking care to not make a sound, and entered nonchalantly. What are you watching? Joe asked, walking over to his mom and taking a seat. She shrieked in surprise. Oh my God! Don't do that! What are you doing here? She asked. Her shriek quickly turned into laughter. What? I thought I might chill out with my mom and watch The Goonies. Remember how we used to watch The Goonies? Do we still have that movie? Joe asked, smiling. His mother leaned over and kissed Joe on the cheek. My son, she said to herself, rolling her eyes humorously. So, how did you get here and what brings you here 2 days before you're supposed to? Aren't you missing school? She asked. Not really. Finals are soon, so all my classes aren't really handing out any more work. And I got a ride from Jennifer. I was thinking I might show up and surprise you. I don't know. Something a good son like me would do. I don't know, Joe said. His mother reached her arm around Joe's shoulders and squeezed him. Well, it's a very nice surprise. Thank you. Are you hungry? Your brother and I had spaghetti last night for dinner. Some is still in the fridge, she said. Joe shrugged. I'll probably have some later. Joe took a look at the TV and burst out laughing. Are you watching Real Housewives of Atlanta right now? Are you seriously doing that? This is how you spend your evenings when I'm not home? You're living a secret life apart from me, he said. Oh, shut up. I'm flipping through channels. Nothing good is on, his mother said. Joe snorted. Everyone knows that old-fashioned television cable is outdated. That shit's over. It's all about Netflix and HBO Go now. That's where you gotta go for some good television. Either that or the Food Network. Also Piff, he said. His mother laughed heartily. You and these phrases. Piff. What the hell is Piff? And I was just on the Food Network, thank you very much. It was Guy's show, though, and you know I don't like that guy, she said. Joe tapped his finger against his chin. You don't like the guy. Interesting, he said, smiling. She gave him a gentle shove. So how do you feel now that you're almost done with your first semester in New York? His mother asked. In debt, Joe said dryly. I'm just hoping it pays off. It will. That college degree will get you a job, Joe. Just keep at it. You'll be done in no time, his mother said. Whatever you say, Mom, Joe said. His mother mimicked Joe. Whatever you say, Mom, whatever you say, Mom, she rolled her eyes. You know, one day you're going to thank me for all this great wisdom I've given you over the years. You should be more careful to not take anything I say for granted, she smiled. Don't worry. It'd be very hard to take you for granted. There were tears in Joseph's eyes. He hadn't felt as panicked as he did in that moment in a very long time. His hands were both balled into fists. He could feel his skin stretch over his knuckles. His brother had yet to contact him. Joe had no idea where he was. He checked the time for the 5th time that hour, 3:37. His brother's school let out at 2:27. His phone's dead, Joe told himself. Does it fucking matter? What the fuck is he going to do? Joe had been at the hospital since 9 that morning. It was Monday. Joe's evening class started in less than 1 hour. He was going to miss it. His phone started vibrating. He looked down at it anxiously, hoping to see his brother's name. It was his father calling to check in on the situation again. He was the first person Joseph had contacted after getting his mother to the hospital. His brother Kevin was the second. He steadied himself before he answered the phone. Joe wanted to sound strong in front of his father. Hey, Joe said. How is everything? Have you heard from Kevin yet? His father's voice sounded strained, but calming. Joe was happy to hear it. I haven't. He got out of school an hour ago. He might be over some friend's house or something. I think his phone is dead. I'm sure I'll hear back from him soon, Joe replied. How is she? Have you heard anything from the doctors? His father asked. She's in the ER right now. She's been in there for 3 hours. I don't even know why it's taking so long. I spoke to a doctor an hour after we got here, and he said that they couldn't pinpoint the problem. They think that she has some internal bleeding going on in the epigastric region of her stomach. They don't know how serious it is, but they've been looking for a wound or something, Joe said. When's the last time you saw your mother? How was she? His father asked. I saw her before they moved her to the ER. She was scared. I'm just feeling kind of upset because they couldn't give me any information. They said they think there's internal bleeding in her stomach, but they aren't sure yet, and we've been here all day, Joe said. Is she in pain? His father asked. A little. She's more scared than anything else. It's coming out of nowhere. She was fine this entire weekend. She was fine. What kind of sickness comes out of nowhere like that? Joe felt his voice crack. He squeezed his eyes shut tight for a moment to keep the tears from coming out. He could feel himself shaking slightly. His entire body was shaking. Don't panic. It can't be anything too serious. She threw up some blood. That is not a symptom of a stroke or a heart attack. Maybe she got food poisoning from something she ate the night before. Did the doctors ask that? Yes, Joe said lowly into the phone. Joe could hear his father searching for something to say. He sighed heavily. Joe heard him whisper a curse away from the phone. Fuck, he said. Joe dropped his head and waited. I'm so sorry I'm not there, Joseph. I didn't know this was going to happen. How could you have? We don't even know what this is yet. We don't know how serious it is. I don't see a point in sitting around expecting the worst. I just want to wait and find out, that's all, Joe said. Do you have school tomorrow? His father asked. Yeah, I'm not going to go, Joe said. You already missed today, didn't you? Can you afford it? It's coming down to the end of the semester, his father said. Yeah, it's really bad timing. Finals are starting next week. You know I can't leave her here, though. I haven't even heard back from Kevin yet. You're going to hear back from Kevin. Joe promised me that sooner or later you're going to find out exactly what it is that's wrong with your mother. They're going to give you a diagnosis. You're going to find out how long she's going to stay in the hospital, and even more importantly, that what's wrong with her isn't fatal. It isn't fatal. And when you find that out, promise me that you'll go back to school and do what you need to do. Can you do that for me? His father asked. Joe recognized the doctor that entered the waiting room as the one that was treating his mother. I have to go. I'm about to get some news, Joe said. Let me know what you find out. I love you, son. Everything is going to be okay, his father said. Joe hung up the phone. The doctor approached him. Joe stood up from his chair and readied himself for anything. He tried to gauge the expression on the doctor's face. It was grim but not overbearing. Joe forced himself to keep his hopes high. The doctor shook his hand. So it looks like we were accurate in our first assumption that the cause of the blood in her vomit was caused from a tear in her stomach lining, internal bleeding. Now we aren't yet able to determine how serious the cut is or what caused it. We may need to have to put her under anesthesia and examine the wound through a small camera that will be inserted through her mouth. Depending on the severity of the wound, we may have to consider surgery as an option to stitch it back up to prevent further bleeding. Right now she's not losing too much blood, but it's definitely our top priority to stop the bleeding. We hope that the cut is small enough that it will close on its own, but either way it's got to be taken care of as soon as possible, the doctor said. He went on and on. The doctor mentioned getting permission from her and several other things. Joe tried to listen carefully. He didn't know the correct questions to ask. Joe sat back down when the doctor walked away and felt as if the conversation had never happened. Key words stuck out to him from the conversation. Surgery, anesthesia, bleeding. Joe nodded his head through all of it, wishing there was more he could do. In less than an hour, his mother was to go under medically induced sleep. That scared Joe. All of it scared him. He was helpless, sitting in the waiting room. Joe stayed at the hospital for another 3 hours. His nerves had exhausted him. He could barely keep his eyes open. He had spoken to Jennifer. She was going to meet him at his house at 8:30. He never heard back from his brother. Joe was at his mother's side when the doctor came in again. He held her hand as they both listened to the information. She wasn't in any serious danger. It was a small cut in her stomach lining that caused the bleeding. They still couldn't discover how it happened, but the good news was that the bleeding had stopped and it would heal on its own. She had to stay at the hospital for a couple more days, bedridden in case the wound opened up again. The doctor left the two alone after that. His mother looked into Joseph's eyes. "Have you heard from Kevin?" she asked. Joe looked at the floor when he answered her. "No," he said. He felt his mother squeeze his hand hard. Joe looked up at her. "Now that we know I'm not going to die, would you do me a favor and find your brother? Make sure he's okay? I won't be able to go to sleep until I know that both of my sons are safe." Tears fell from her eyes as she finished her last sentence. Joe understood why. Joe stood up and leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. "I'll call you as soon as I find him," he whispered to her. She closed her eyes and let the tears stream down the side of her face. Joe drove straight home. He wanted to deflate. His energy had been running high all day. He wanted to get in his bed and potentially cry for a bit. Joe looked forward to the fact that Jennifer would be with him soon. It was strange. He knew that there was nothing that she could do to help the situation, but the fact that she would be there with him was enough. Someone would be there for him. But first he had to find Kevin. Joe entered his house through the garage door. As soon as he walked in, he called for his brother and headed in the direction of his room. He could hear that the TV was on. When Joe got to the door, it was closed. Joe put one hand on the doorknob and gripped it with all his strength. He took a couple of deep breaths, making his best effort not to knock the door off its hinges. He opened it slowly. His brother was there, lying on his bed, playing Call of Duty. "What's up?" Kevin asked, taking a quick glance towards Joe and returning back his attention to the TV. "Where have you been?" Joe asked. "I was at Tim's. I got home like an hour ago," Kevin said. "Was your phone dead?" Joe asked. "Yeah, it's charging now. I saw you left a voicemail," Kevin said. "You didn't listen to it?" Joe asked, trying to keep his anger in check. "I don't listen to voicemails, man. You should have texted me," Kevin said, smirking. "I texted you 3 times. Look at your phone," Joe said. Kevin reached across his bed and grabbed his phone. "Oh, fuck," he said after looking at it for a moment. "You did," he said, laughing. "Mom's been in the hospital all day. I took her there right after you left for school." Joe's hand had yet to leave the doorknob. His anger was being directed into it. He wanted to crush it. "What? Are you serious? What happened?" Kevin asked, startled. He paused the game and stood up suddenly. Joe finally had his attention. "I'm trying not to yell at you for being an idiot, because at the end of the day, it's not your fault that you didn't know our mom was going to end up in the hospital today. And it's also not your fault that your phone died while you were at school and that you didn't feel like charging it all fucking day. Am I supposed to tell you to listen to your voicemails? Would that change everything? It wouldn't. I'm not blaming you. I'm just kind of upset as to how today has gone, that's all," Joe said. He felt his anger leaving him. His grip on the doorknob lessened. He let go of it. The joints of his fingers hurt from the tension. "What's wrong with Mom?" Kevin asked. Joe looked at his brother. He looked like a scared 17-year-old boy. Just a moment ago he was lounging on his bed with not a care in the world, and now he is standing upright with a trembling lip and a horrified look on his face. Joe softened in front of that fear. It was the same fear that he had been feeling all day. "She's better now. There was a tear in her stomach that caused some internal bleeding. She threw up blood earlier this morning. That's what started it. She's going to be at the hospital for a couple of days so they can keep a close eye on it. It looks like she's going to be okay, though. You need to call her." "I'll talk to Dad. We've all been wondering where you were," Joe said. Joe left his brother's room after that. He headed downstairs to the basement and threw himself on the couch. Joe buried his face into a pillow and remained there until Jennifer texted him saying she had arrived. She hugged him as soon as Joe opened the door. His arms went around her small frame, and he embraced her as he had never had before. He felt her fingertips pressing into his back. He pulled back and looked into her eyes. She had tears in them. "My emotional girlfriend," Joe thought. He kissed her. "Are you okay?" she asked after the kiss ended. "Not really," Joe said. His honesty surprised him. "But it's not me who's going to be in the hospital for the next couple of days, so I shouldn't really say anything." He took her hand and led her downstairs to his room. "Well, I'm here for you, Joe. I just want you to know that. If there's a single thing I can do, just let me know," Jennifer said. Joe sat down on his bed and shook his head. It was foggy. He felt as if he didn't know where he was. He was too tired. He felt something warm on his hand. Joe looked down. It was Jennifer's hand on top of his. He grabbed it and squeezed. Then she picked it up and kissed it. "She's going to be okay," Joe said aloud. Whether it was for Jennifer's ears or his own, he didn't know. "I know she will," Jennifer said. "Thanks for coming here. I didn't want to be alone tonight." More honesty. Joe was too numb to be shocked, but he was aware. "I understand. I wouldn't want to be either," Jennifer said. "I felt really bad leaving my mom at the hospital. She wanted me to find Kevin. His phone had been turned off. No one could get in touch with him. He's upstairs now," Joe said. He slid further onto his bed over to the wall. He leaned his head against it and tilted it up towards the ceiling with his eyes shut tight. The world spun around him. He couldn't feel anything, not the bed underneath him or the wall behind him. He felt nothing but Jennifer's warm hand holding his. "Is there anything I can do, Joe?" Jennifer asked anxiously. "I've never seen you like this. I'm scared." "It's fine. I'm just upset, that's all. I'll be fine." "I just need some time," Joe said. "You don't have to be so upset now. You know that she's going to be fine. You can let go of all that tension that you've been feeling all day. You can let go of it," Jennifer said. Joe opened his eyes but kept them staring at the ceiling. "This is exactly how I felt when I first found out that my brother had died," Joe said quietly. He waited for a reaction from Jennifer. He didn't want to look at her, not at that moment, not yet. He listened for a gasp or a movement of discomfort. He heard none. She said nothing. Joe went on. "I remember my hands sweating, like really heavy sweating, and I was dizzy. I felt like I was going to faint. I think I almost did. But my mom was there, and I wanted to be strong for my mom. She was crying on the floor near the telephone. My dad was on the way over, even though she didn't want him there. He closed his eyes again. He could feel his eyes starting to sting. He kept them shut tight. This thing happens to me every time something bad happens in my family. Every single time, I'm like aware of it. I always think something is going to happen to the people I care about, ever since I was little. When my brother died, I knew something bad was about to happen like a week before. I just knew it. I felt it. I was literally driving to school just feeling anxious, and then when we all found out, he didn't have any friends. He went away to college and slept in a dorm room and didn't have any friends. He never called me. He never called any of us. He just kept it all to himself. His loneliness. And I fucking knew it. I never called him, Joe said. Joe, you know it's not your fault that your brother killed himself. You know that, right? Jennifer asked timidly. I know that. But it doesn't change the fact that I could have done more to help him. That's why I came back on Wednesday. I swear that's the reason. I knew something was wrong. My mom said she missed me, and something told me to come back early to be with her. And now she's in the hospital, and all I can say is that I'm happy that I'm here. I'm happy that I was here for my family for once, Joe said. Oh, Joe, Jennifer said. She leaned her head against his chest and started to cry. Joe was startled by the suddenness of it. He put his arm around her shoulders and felt her body quiver underneath him. Why are you crying? Joe asked, confused. Because I just love you so much, Jennifer said. Joe could feel his shirt dampen from her tears. Her entire body shook. I love you too. Could you stay the night? I know you have school in the morning. I have to go back too. I don't want to, but I don't really have a choice. It's the last couple of weeks of school. I hate leaving her, but I have to go back, Joe said. Jennifer lifted her head slowly and looked into Joe's eyes. She wiped at her eyes and sniffled. She looked a mess. Joe was never a fan of when girls cried. He forgave her in that moment. She leaned towards him and kissed him softly on the lips. Of course I'll stay with you. I love you, she whispered. They had sex that night. It was slow, passionate sex. She moaned softly into his ears. Her hands clung tightly to the back of his neck. They kissed during it, hard and strong. Every minute he felt like an hour of pleasure. Joe was lost in her. He didn't forget about his mother in the hospital or his deceased brother who he was unable to help, but the fact that in that moment he was so connected with another person, physically and emotionally, made the facts that surrounded his life seem easier to bear. So he kissed her again as his best way of thanking her. Joe felt love. Jennifer dropped him off at the bus station at 6 o'clock in the morning. The bus ride was a little less than 3 hours. He spent it trying his hardest not to dwell on the rough day that had just passed. He spoke to his father briefly, told him that he was proud that his son was doing the right thing by going back to school. Joe tried to agree with him, but he couldn't help but get a sick feeling in his stomach every time he made the attempt to rationalize. Joe went to his 9 o'clock class straight from the bus ride. He did his best to focus on what the professor was saying. He was reviewing for the final. 4 papers were due by the end of the week. Joe had a lot to get done. That worried him. He had to find a way to get it done. His father couldn't help. He was far away. His brother, Kevin, he would have to look after their mother while Joe was gone. Joe would make sure Kevin would. It was the only solution. Joe arrived at his dorm hours later, feeling exhausted even as the day just started. He opened the door and walked in to see Caleb and Richard sitting on the floor with 2 Xbox controllers in their hands. They were focused on the TV in front of them that seemed to have appeared from out of nowhere. Caleb and Rich both turned to Joe when he entered the room. Hey, Joe, Caleb said casually. What's up, man? Rich said. Hey, what's up, Caleb? I'm surprised to see you here, Joe said. Yeah, I promised Rich I would come up to New York and play the new Halo with him. It took me a while to clear my schedule, but I am a man of my word, so here I am, Caleb said. Joe pulled up a chair from the kitchen and pulled it over to where the two sat on the floor. Where'd you guys get the TV? You didn't bring that with you, of course, Joe asked Caleb. Nah, I borrowed it from the guy who lives in the dorm across the hall. Actually, Caleb borrowed it. But yeah, cool, right? Rich asked. Caleb looked over his shoulder at Joe. I'd invite you to join, but unfortunately I only had 2 Xbox controllers at my disposal. Maybe if I die, but that probably won't happen because I'm way better at this game than Reach, Caleb said, grinning. Oh yeah? Maybe we'll find out this summer when we start system linking again. I'm just kind of shocked that you came all the way up to New York to play Halo 4 on a Tuesday. I mean, that's fucking commitment, and it's basically finals week too. Kudos to both of you, Joe said somewhat sarcastically. Yeah, fuck finals. I plan on staying up all night and working on all that shit after Caleb leaves. You want to pull an all-nighter with me, Joe? Just bang out all the fucking papers that we have to do and coast for the rest of the week? That's my plan, at least, Rich said. I'm down. I guess I'll probably take a nap soon. That way I'll be able to stay up all night, Joe said. Where were you yesterday? Did you stay in Mount Holly? You skipped class, Rich asked curiously. His eyes stayed on the TV screen as his fingers twiddled with the joysticks and triggers on the controller. Yeah, I had to stay an extra day unexpectedly, Joe said dismissively. What was unexpected about it? Caleb asked, glancing over at Joe before returning his gaze back to the television. My mom had to randomly go to the hospital. She threw up some blood in the morning and I had to take her there and find out what's wrong with her. So yeah, I had to skip class for that, Joe said. Shit. Caleb's head snapped towards Joe as his expression changed to a look of mild concern. Is she okay? Throwing blood up is pretty serious. Did you find out what's wrong with her? Caleb asked. Yeah, internal bleeding of the stomach. Apparently it was nothing too serious. She's going to be in the hospital for a couple more days just so they can monitor her. But yeah, she should be fine, Joe said. That's good, man. I'm sorry you had to go through that experience. I despise illnesses or ailments of any kind. I'm happy for you that it was caught early on and that it wasn't anything too serious, Caleb said. Yeah, that sucks, man, Rich added. Yeah, but life goes on. I'm definitely down for the all-nighter tonight, though, Richie boy. What time are you trying to start? Joe asked. What time you leaving? Rich asked Caleb. Caleb shrugged. Well, given the fact that it is a Tuesday during finals weeks, as Joe so aptly pointed out, I should say around 7, maybe 8 at the latest. So let's say 7:30, Caleb said, smiling. Rich looked at Joe. 7:30, he repeated. 7:30 it is. Have fun killing robots and aliens, Joe said jokingly as he headed into his bedroom. Oh, trust me, we will, Caleb said. I'm writing this paper so hard. I'm going to come off as the biggest hard-ass in that class when I'm done writing this hard-ass paper, Joe said. Lucky I'm not in that class because the paper I'm writing would blow your paper out the water on the hard rating scale. Out of the water, Rich said. Oh, word? Does your paper use words like millennial? Because if it don't, you might want to consider giving yourself a reality check. Your paper might win the award for best gay paper, Joe said. Yeah? Your paper might win the award for most pretentious piece of shit ever conceived of by a human being. That's actually an award. I looked it up once and people have won it. You're the best contender right now. And it's every 4 years, Rich said. Oh shit, like the Olympics? Joe asked. Rich nodded his head gravely. Just like the fucking Olympics. Joe smiled at the exchange and continued working. They had been up for 3 hours. Richard lay in his bed with his laptop across his lap while Joe sat at the corner desk a few feet away from him. They worked in silence for the majority of the time. Rich listened to music on his earbuds, while Joe occasionally texted back and forth with Jennifer. She had checked up on him. He felt good. He had spoken with his mother previously, and she told him that she was feeling much better. Kevin had been in to see her. That eased his mind greatly. The all-nighter with Richard was going great. Joe wasn't worried any longer about the outcome of the semester. So far he had an A in all 5 of his classes. Joe planned on finishing with that. Another hour passed. Joe could hear Drake's new song, started from the bottom, blasting from Rich's tiny earbuds. Joe smiled to himself and kept the joke to himself. It was 12 o'clock. Joe's eyes were starting to hurt from staring at the computer screen in front of him. He closed them and leaned back in his chair. He yawned and stretched his arms slowly. Joe didn't open his eyes until the front legs of the chair returned to the ground. He jumped. Rich had gotten up and was standing next to the desk in front of Joe, smiling creepily. The fuck? Joe said, laughing. Food, Rich asked, gesturing suggestively with his eyebrows. Joe chuckled and shook his head. Yeah, I could get some food. Jubilee, a.k.a. the New York version of Wawa? Joe asked. Jubilee is a way more piff than Wawa. Way more, Rich said. Agreed. Let's go then, Joe said. The two pulled on their light jackets and left the dorm. It was cool outside. Joe could feel the anticipated summer right around the corner. It's been a short fucking year, Joe said absent-mindedly. Yeah, I guess you could say that. It did go by fast now that I think about it. It's basically almost summer again. I feel like last summer just ended, Rich said. I can't help but wonder if I got anything done this year. I mean, I know I went to school for a semester and shit, but we didn't get any filming done. Fucking Galaxy Boys isn't even finished yet. The longest project we've ever tried to do could have taken less than 1 hour to complete, Joe said. Yeah, I hear you, man. I'm just trying to keep moving forward. It's going to be weird going back home for the summer. I really wanted to take summer classes just to get school over with as soon as possible, but I can't afford it. So I'm basically just going to be sitting around my house all day with no money, feeling like shit for not getting anything done, Rich said. Yeah, you should probably get a job this summer. That would definitely help, Joe said, laughing. A job would definitely increase my income. Income would be nice, Rich agreed. It's actually kind of funny if you think about the fact that you haven't had a job in over a year, and you're 22. That's fucking ridiculous. I envy you, but at the same time, now you're broke, so it's like, how do you choose? Joe asked. Yeah, I agree. There's a couple of things I think I'd like to check off this summer, just to feel more productive. Getting a job is definitely high on the list. I'm planning to start working out hardcore again. I fucking got fat sitting in the fucking cage of a dorm all day every day. I want to start running, Rich said. Working out is dope. I miss it. I'm getting out of shape, too. You remember when my arms used to be mad cut? Like, they were never as big as Shaun's or Chris's, but they used to be mad cut. I'm probably going to work on that this summer. Hopefully we can finally get some filming done instead of just sitting around like we did last summer. Holy fuck, when's the last time we made something good? Joe asked. A long time, Rich said. Don't you miss making quality stuff? It's ridiculous because before I used to care about people actually watching our vids and liking it and shit. I don't even care about that anymore. I just miss filming good, quality stuff. Fuck the audience. I'd be happy filming something and not even posting it, just making it for YFC, so we could actually feel like we're doing something with our lives again, Joe said. Yeah, I hear you, man, Rich said. They arrived at Jubilee. Joe and Rich made identical orders. Persian hoagie with bacon, lettuce, and mayo. As they headed home with their sandwiches, Joe noticed the naked wall of a building near them. A curious feeling came over Joe as he stared at the side of that building. Do you want to eat the hoagies outside? I mean, we might as well since we're going to be in there working for the rest of the night, Joe said. Sure. Where do you want to eat, though? Rich asked. Joe pointed to the wall. A lonely street lamp lit the space underneath it. It was cinematic. Joe was attracted to it because of the beautiful scene he could see himself shooting underneath that street lamp. The two sat down underneath the wall and stretched their legs out in front of them. They opened their sandwiches and bit into them at the same time. They chewed their food in silence and looked at the world around them. Their eyes met in the middle of their sweeping gaze. Joe smiled with his mouth full of the sandwich. Richard returned it. Nice, right? Joe said. Rich nodded his head and kept eating. Joe put his head against the brick wall. He enjoyed the moment. The weather was just warm enough that his body did not shiver in protest of staying outside. It was brisk. It made him feel alive and aware of his surroundings. Everything was going to be okay. He knew it. Joe was happy to realize that. Everything was going to be okay. Tell me this sandwich wouldn't taste so much better with some nice-ass piff to suck into our lungs, Joe said. Rich laughed. Weed does accentuate food. It definitely does that, he said. We wouldn't even go back and keep working. How much did you get done tonight? Joe asked. A good amount. I finished one paper and I'm almost done with another one. I am kind of tired though, Rich said. Right? I'm like tired, but I'm not physically tired. I'm just kind of tired of writing. We should chill out for a bit if we're going to continue. Like watch an episode of Always Sunny or something. Maybe 2 episodes, Joe said, laughing. Yo, you know what's on Netflix that for some reason I've been wanting to watch? Jackass, Rich said. What? So have I. That's ridiculous. I don't even know why I've been wanting to watch it either. We should totally watch that, Joe said. Yeah? You want to? Rich asked. Let's do it. As ridiculous as it may sound, let's watch Jackass at 12:30 in the morning, Joe said. They watched Jackass 1 and 2. They went to bed at 4 in the morning. Joe slept well.